Okay, well, just looking at the time, just want to be mindful. Let's go ahead and get started. I see that we have the vast majority of folks here with us already. So first and foremost, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for today's solution seminar. My name is Fernando and I'm with the Region 9 Head Start Association, and I'm just thrilled to be here with you today as your webinar host. So feel free to contact me via the chat option of Zoom with any logistical questions you may have throughout the session. Any issues regarding audio, any video, connection issues, let me know and I'm happy to troubleshoot with you behind the scenes to get you up and running. Just so you know, today's session will be recorded and will be made available for on-demand access to all of our registered participants within the next 24 hours. A follow-up email will go out to all participants with the link to the recording once it's ready for access. We strongly encourage your participation today, so please send us your comments and questions via the chat and Q&A tools of Zoom, and we'll do our best to address them live as time permits. Now I'll pass it along to Danny Torres from PITC to get the presentation started. But before I do that, I want to thank you again for your time, and I hope you enjoyed the session. Take it away, Danny.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to today's solution webinar hosted by the Region 9 Head Start Association and facilitated by the Program for Infant and Toddler Care at WestEd, also known as PITC. So today's topic, the PITC Curriculum, a responsive, relationship-based approach to support learning in infants and toddlers. Thank you all very, very much for joining us. And as you're joining in, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know who you are and where you're joining us from. And you can use the Zoom chat feature on the menu bar there. When posting, please feel free to select all panelists and attendees so everyone can see. I also wanted to let you all know that we're going to have a short feedback survey at the end of the webinar. We certainly would like to learn from your experience. The survey should pop up on your screen as you depart, so look out for that. As Fernando said, my name is Danny Torres. I serve as WestEd's Senior Manager of Publications and Dissemination. I'm honored and super excited to be here with you today. I certainly think you'll find the presentation incredibly useful and engaging. This webinar will be led by my wonderful and accomplished colleagues, Amber Morabito, PITC Curriculum Manager, and Diane Harkins, Senior Program Associate at WestEd. They both are key contributors and co-authors of the new PITC curriculum. Before we move into the contents of today's webinar, I'd like to take a brief moment to introduce WestEd. WestEd is a national, nonprofit, nonpartisan education research, development, and service agency. At WestEd, we believe that learning changes lives. Every day, we partner with schools and communities across the country to improve outcomes for youth and adults of all ages. Today's webinar focuses on one really important facet of the work that we do at WestEd, and I encourage you to visit us at wested.org to learn more. With that, I'd like to pass the mic over to Amber. She'll be starting us off today. Amber, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Danny, for that warm welcome. Much appreciation to you. Diane, would you like to say something before I get us started?
Just happy to be here. Welcome, everybody, our colleagues and compañeras from California, as well as other states. Good to see you all in the chat feature.
Thank you. Okay, so without further ado, here we go. So what is PITC? Some of you on the call, hopefully a lot of you on the call today and in the room have heard of PITC, but we wanted to take a little moment to talk about what is PITC. So PITC stands for the Program for Infant Toddler Care. And at the Program for Infant Toddler Care, PITC, we consider relationship-based approach to caring for infants and toddlers essential. It's paramount. Being in relationship with our children is what PITC is all about. We believe that responsive, respectful care in relationships is key to supporting early learning. And rather than developing lessons for infants to master, we believe that adults who implement PITC find ways to allow for, expand, adapt, encourage infants' efforts in pursuing their inborn learning agenda. So essentially what they're born with and how they come into this world is what we're saying caregivers' job is to figure out what that is and facilitate that for them. So to support implementation of PITC, we provide professional development all over the country and resources to early childhood the education community. PITC promotes relationship-based care through 6 essential policies. And I'm going to show you that on our next slide. So here you'll see on the screen our 6 essential policies. And at the heart of PITC is a commitment to care for children from diverse cultures, lifestyles, preferences, abilities, learning styles, and needs. And so when we look at these 6 essential policies, our work is anchored in these policies. PITC is based on sound research and child development, as well as family research. So our first policy is primary caregiving. We believe that their children should be cared for in small groups with one person or a secondary primary care teacher that is responsible for most of their care throughout the day. Continuity of care is another one of our policies. This is the idea that the children stay with their cohort and or teacher for as long as possible. We know that many programs do this in very different ways. We know that family child care providers do this by design very well as they are caring for mixed age groups. We have small groups as another program policy. We know that the learning happens in small groups and really promote development. Individualized care. This is the idea that the child feels seen. We understand how they are learning, what they need. We know them on an intimate basis, and we're providing care based on what we know they need. Culturally responsive care. This is the idea that we are considering the child's culture, community, and family when we're caring for them, and we represent that by our environments, the way that we interact with the families, our curriculum, etc. And then inclusive care. We are creating environments that include all children into the curriculum and into our environments, no matter their abilities, needs, or preferences. So that's our PITC and our 6 essential policies in a nutshell. I've just talked to you about our philosophy. What I'd like to do now, and what we'll do for the rest of this session, is talk to you about our newest product, the PITC Curriculum. The PITC Curriculum, our planning tools and strategies, support the efforts of family childcare providers, center-based teachers and leaders to facilitate high-quality, individualized learning and healthy development for children birth to 3. Unique to the PITC curriculum is that planning for the curriculum is based on reflection, observation, documentation, and play of learning that represents each child's developmental abilities, their strengths, their needs, their family, culture, their language. Essentially, what we're saying with this product is that planning is possible and helps children and teachers deepen their understanding, share meaning, learn alongside of each other. Their learning is supported and strengthened through their caring relationships that they build with each other. Remember, I said we're all about relationships. So what we're going to do for the rest of this session is talk more about the uniqueness of our new product that we're so excited about. Before we get into the product, let's start with considering this idea. Curriculum begins with our image of the child. What we know is that infants have their own learning agenda. They come into the world wired, ready to learn. They seek out their learning experiences, and the research supports that they're even doing this in the womb. They're intrinsically motivated to learn. They're intrinsically motivated to make meaning, to build relationships. Ultimately, all day, every day, infants are learning and they're trying to figure things out. They're taking in information, they're exploring, they're wondering, they're excited. They show us that they're excited. Learning for them it's simultaneously an emotional experience, social, communicative. They're learning through their senses, through their physical experiences, curiosity. So when we think about the image of a child in that way, it helps us visualize our image for the children we care for. And so some of you on the call might be leaders of programs, you might be classroom teachers, all of which it starts with our image of the child in terms of how we're supporting and building our curriculum for them. So we must ask ourselves, how is learning and development best facilitated by me or the ones that I support or the teachers that I coach or whatever the case is, but how is it best facilitated by the adults in care? Based on research over the last 30 years, we understand that infants learn from a mix of internal programming, so that's that innate piece I was talking about that they're born with, and the influence of those around them, their parents, their families, their first educators, their teachers, their peers, culture, community, the environment. This interplay of nature and nurture influences their development. So I mentioned how infants are wired and how they learn. And ultimately, these skills are facilitated and deepened in relationship with adults. Those are the adults that care for them and around them. And what we want care teachers to know is that there's this major role that they play in developing the curriculum for their children, and it starts with them and their relationships with the children. So ultimately, what we're saying is, what is the learning agenda of infants and toddlers? We know it starts with our image of the child. So what we've done is we pulled out these 3 ideas. 1, their agenda is to seek out and build relationships. From the moment they're born, they look towards the voices that they've heard while they were in the womb. They observe, they imitate, they explore, they solve problems. And they do this out of their innate need and curiosity and the relationship they have with their caregivers. And then we know that their job is to make sense of the world. They have to figure out how things move and fit and how to use these tools that they're learning about, cause and effect, how to organize their thoughts, their actions. What we'd like to do right now, because I'd love to hear from you, we'd like to launch a poll. And with this poll, what I'd like you to do is to select one of these 3 ideas and think about which one do you notice infants engaged in more? Do you notice them engaged in building relationships, observing, imitating, exploring, solving problems, or trying to make sense of the world? So that poll is now on the screen. Please feel free to vote, and we will consider the results once they're in. Okay, we're going to give it about 30 more seconds. Feels like we need some music here. Okay, thank you all. And we have the results on the screen. So it looks like the winner here is number 2, that you noticed infants observing, imitating, and exploring and solving problems. Yep, we know they're constantly testing out their hypotheses. They're trying things out. That from the moment they're mobile, they are definitely doing that exploring, aren't they? We know they're pulling up, they're cruising. From the moment they're born, they're observing. That imitating happens so early with those coos. This last one here, making sense of the world, that got the lowest rating. And that may be because we just aren't sure what that means, or we can define it differently. But it does really blend into number 2 in terms of solving problems and really trying to understand. Has it ever happened to you where you've looked in the face of a child and it's almost like you can see their wheels spinning, like, oh, aha, like that aha moment? And that's why we speak slowly and make sure that we allow that pause, because they often are trying to make sense of the world and what we just have said to them. Thank you, everybody, for taking part in that poll. Okay, so when you look at this picture, what do you see? Do you all see a seesaw? That goes up and down. So with this seesaw, how do you think it relates to curriculum planning? Why do we even have this picture in here? You have any ideas? Feel free to use the chat. I already see one person. Yes, a comment came in that this would be considered dangerous. True, very true. But the dangerous things sometimes are the funnest things, right? You can count as you go up and down. Thank you, Christine. That could happen and be a part of the curriculum experience. Teamwork, Fatima says, yep, you really need 2 people to do a seesaw that are almost about equal weight, or you have to kind of adjust there and play with some physics. Balance, life goes up and down. Yes, lesson, like life lessons. The learning goes back and forth. A lot to explore in nature. It is a very beautiful setting in nature, for sure. Problem solving, figuring it out. Great ideas coming in the chat. We picked the seesaw because what it does for us is it represents this tension that exists between what we know about infants and toddlers and how they learn in a very emergent way, and this need to plan curriculum for them. And based on this is how we engage with the infant. And more specifically, this tension is evident in our image of the child and planning curriculum for them. So if we know that infants are both competent and vulnerable, when we think about planning curriculum for them, we have to keep in mind that, yes, they're born with this innate and inborn urge to learn. They seek out new information about the world around them through their senses. And they're vulnerable because they're dependent on us, the adults in their lives, to keep them safe. So there is that balance. Someone brought up safety with thinking about this seesaw. Next, we know that infants thrive on predictability and novelty. So there it is again, that tension. So predictability, we've talked about, we know the power of schedules and following individualized schedules for the infants. That predictability, young children are wired emotionally to expect that when I'm tired, I'm going to be allowed to sleep. When I'm hungry, I'm going to be given a bottle, that their needs will be met. They'll give us their signal, and the adults in their lives will understand and address their needs. At the same time, they're wired intellectually to respond to experiences that violate these expectations. And those things are like the new and the novel things that surprise them and grab their attention. The thing that comes to mind is like the Jack-in-a-Box. So maybe it's just a box and it's closed, and the surprise is when it pops up, because that completely violated the expectations of the child. So both parts of the child, the wiring for this predictability and novelty, need to be addressed. We also know that development is a combination of nature and nurture. So we talked about that, their inborn traits, and then the environment that influences their development. Finally, children are researchers. That was evident in the last slide. You've seen it. They're trying to solve problems. They're trying to figure out the world. So they develop and test their hypotheses. We can probably all think of a million examples, but we have a child that's dropping that spoon on the floor and watching us as we pick it up, dropping it again, watching us pick it up. They're testing out their hypothesis, right? So now that I've explained why we picked the seesaw, how do these ideas fit into your experience with working with infants and toddlers or the people that you supervise? Do you see some of that tension in thinking about working with them and planning? Lots of great feedback still coming in the chat about the seesaw analogy. Thank you. Something else we know at PITC, and especially when we're considering this curriculum, is that we have to consider the family and culture. So children don't come to us alone. They come with us with a family. I know you're all thinking about family partnership, and it's a real strength of a program when you are involving the families in your programming. And keeping this in mind, that families are a critical aspect of any curriculum, and especially with the PITC curriculum, we are considering family a critical element as we plan, and a recognition of the assets that family, culture, and language bring to the curriculum. And essentially what we're saying is that these elements, the family, the culture, the language, are assets that support the child's understanding of the world outside of the classroom and inside. So building our curriculum with those things in mind is paramount. How are you doing? I've been saying a lot. You with me? Okay. So considering all that we've discussed so far, the image of the child, the tension that exists with planning. Thank you for the yeses in the chat. It's so strange presenting on Zoom and I can't see you, but I know you're there listening, so thank you for that. So what we've done so far, we've considered the image of the child, we've considered the tension that exists between planning the curriculum. Where does that leave the care teacher? So what I'm going to do is read this quote, and I want you to highlight a word in your mind or a couple of words that stand out. Where does that leave the care teacher when thinking about planning curriculum? So the evolving role of the care teacher. In light of this growing body of research, there's emerging a dramatic view of the infant care teacher. Neither babysitter nor trainer, but instead a loving facilitator of the child's learning agenda to gain emotional, cognitive, language, physical, and social competence. So neither babysitter nor trainer, but instead a loving facilitator. What words stood out for you in that quote? Feel free to use the chat. That quote was brought to us by the dear Ron Lally, co-founder of PITC. Child learning agenda and loving facilitator, yep. Loving. Teacher as a loving facilitator. Respect. Loving. Really nice. This is the child's agenda, yep. It's based on research. So I'm excited about our curriculum. I hope that you're getting excited about it. I'm excited about this quote. And why we put it in here is because what this quote does is it helps us realize that this is an exciting opportunity in adopting our curriculum for teachers to find joy, meaning, as well as plan experiences for children that light their children up. They get to be in relationship with their children, figure out what their interests are, observe deeply, document, and then plan the best experience for their children in care. So here are some ways that we've thought about how care teachers can shift their role from whatever that idea was, right? But just expand it to this idea of being a loving facilitator. Care teachers may have thought of them in many other ways and maybe never thought about this idea of a loving facilitator. So here are some ways: observing and listening to children's ideas and actions. And I know that you're doing some of these. So these are some to add to your list and some more things to think about. Reflect on what you see. And then when you reflect, you make it visible. What did you notice? And then how do you make it visible? Create learning encounters that build on the interest of the children. That came through the chat. So it comes from the kids. So building on that. Working from this point of view of not knowing, but trying to figure it out. So does that sound familiar? We talked about that that's kind of the image of the child and what children are negotiating. They're being researchers. So now we're suggesting that care teachers take that same stance of curiosity, not knowing, but trying to figure it out. Reflective teacher planning, being reflective, talking in teams, looking back at your notes, getting creative, getting creative with time, space, materials, setting up unexpected events. So these are just some ways, and I know that you and the people that you support will think of others, but it will require a shift or a continuation if you're already doing these things in terms of curriculum planning with the PITC curriculum. The caregiver is a major component and plays a major role as facilitator with our curriculum. So our hope is that in the adoption of the PITC curriculum, children, care teachers, and families feel joy, wonder, and excitement when implementing the PITC curriculum. It'll be a parallel process where care teachers and families will learn alongside their children, and that there'll be this reignition of those feelings of joy, wonder, and excitement. And if you're not smiling when you see this picture, look again, because it is the cutest picture. These faces really speak joy to me. Okay. So what do we want the curriculum to do? With the PITC curriculum, this is what we hope it does for you. One, it pursues the interest of the children. It's coming from your observations of what they're doing, and you're building on that as that loving facilitator. So it pursues their interest. Next, it adds complexity to self-directed play. So even if you just look at this picture here on the screen, these two look like they have a plan, right? So that's self-directed play. So thinking about how we can build a curriculum or a moment here with these two that adds on to what they're already doing. So adding complexity. It also helps with practicing new skills. So we're creating curriculum that do that, creating moments that children are able to practice their new skills. And then finally, we want the curriculum to expand understanding. Remember, we talked about how infants come to us with their learning agenda, but they're still trying to make sense of it. So we're building experiences that help them make sense of what they're experiencing, which expands their understanding. Diane is now going to talk to us about how caregivers build the curriculum.
Thank you, Amber. And that bell was not me saying it's my turn. It was my phone accidentally going off, so I apologize, but it is my turn. All right, so building the curriculum. This scene you see in front of you with these children is a typical scene in any center-based or family childcare program. And as Amber has discussed, these children have an agenda. I'm not sure what it is, but they have an agenda. They're really focused on what they're doing. And over there on the right, you can see a pair of knees and some black shoes, somebody in jeans, and that's you. You're the care teacher or the family childcare provider observing and thinking, what's going on here? What's their agenda? What are they attempting to do? And how can I build upon that? So we're going to talk some more about what we offer in the PITC curriculum that will help you in this reflective process. Next slide, please. And so I lovingly call this the donut. This is a representation of our reflective curriculum planning process. And in the outer part of the circle, you'll see down near the bottom, the phases of this process. The teacher, the knees that you saw in the previous picture, she's observing, she's paying attention to what's going on there. And you might have noticed there was another child who we couldn't see, just saw his back, paying attention to that child as well, listening for the other children. So it's not just focused on one child, but what's going on in the environment. Secondly, the second part of this process is documentation. People document in all kinds of ways. They may take notes on sticky note paper. They may take photos of the children, little video clips. They may save some of the children's artifacts. Edith just asked a question. This is really important. Thank you, Edith. This is specifically for birth to 3. We're looking at curriculum planning for infants and toddlers, which most people in the outside world would say, what is that about? Why do you need curriculum for infants and toddlers? But as you know, it's important. They develop so quickly in these early years. And we know from brain development how important those changes are. So this is why we have this curriculum to help support that healthy development in each child. So the next part is the planning process, and I'll go into more detail there because that's where you'll get a lot of, get an idea of the resources that the curriculum offers. And then next is implementation, trying it out, seeing what works. The lovely part of this that we want to emphasize is there isn't one right answer. There are many ways to support children in their development. And so I think it kind of lets us off the hook that we've got some resources for you with the PITC curriculum, and you're bringing your own experience, imagination, ideas, and your knowledge of the children to the process. You're an important piece of this. Next slide, please. So the inner part of the circle, I call that the custard or the jelly, depending on what kind of donut you like, has to do with the 5 domains of development and learning. And we know in the ELOF, and we're using the ELOF in this curriculum, that it includes children's approaches to learning, their social emotional development, their cognition, their language and communication, and their perceptual, motor, and physical development. That's a tall order. We have in one of our resources that we'll be talking about in a little bit, it's called the learning progressions. And within these 5 domains, there are 21 subdomains that further describe what's happening with children in this 3-year period. So it's a lot. And many of us don't come into this profession with highly developed knowledge of child development. But one of the things this curriculum offers is the opportunity to build your fluency in the language of development. So as I've said on other in other sessions, that if you're at a party and someone says, well, what kind of work do you do? And you say, well, I work with infants and toddlers. And the person responds, oh, that's a lot of diapering and feeding bottles. And you might say, yes, it is. I do that. And I support their cognitive self-regulation. I support their perceptual development. You, as the care teacher, are offering so much that most people in the world are not aware of. So I believe that this curriculum helps build your fluency in that language of development. Next slide, please.
Before we go there, Diane, let's check in with people about
Oh yeah,
these domains.
we have a poll, right?
We do.
Thanks for reminding me. We tend to, I think, earlier in our career, but even later, pay attention to one or two domains more than the others. It's just kind of the lens that we wear. So if you could, we're going to pull up a poll with these 5 domains and choose the one where you tend to spend most of your time when you're observing, noticing, planning curriculum. What do you tend to focus on more? And remember, there's no one right answer. It's really starting from where you're at and what your focus is. I know we're a large group, but I'm thinking, Fernanda, we can close the poll in a moment and see what our participants have said. Okay, I'm not surprised about social emotional. It's been such a strong emphasis in our profession in the last several years, and obviously going through the pandemic even more so. So yes, social emotional is often the lens that many of us wear when we're thinking about the children in our care. And I'm not surprised to see that cognition is, actually it was 2 out of 70 people who mentioned cognition as where they tend to focus. That is on children's thinking, how they think, how they solve problems, etc. Again, the nice thing about the PITC curriculum is it'll give you practice in all of these, and it'll give you ideas in all of these domains, so you get stronger in understanding how both the individual aspects of development, but also how these are all integrated. Because honestly, often all 5 are at play when we're observing children, but we have a tendency to focus on more of one or another. I think because I kind of did this backwards, that I'm gonna skip the next poll and just tell you to think about this for a moment. So if one of the things that we do in addition to this curriculum is we offer training on the curriculum. And so one of the questions we would ask participants after we go through these 5 domains is, okay, now that you've heard a little bit more about these, which one would you like to focus more on? Which one would, instead of maybe social emotional development where you know you're strong, what's another domain that you'd like to pay more attention to and weave into your curriculum a bit more than you have in the past? So you can think about that. Which one kind of interests you that you'd like to pay attention to? Okay. All right. So the other thing about learning, not only is development integrated, but it's also a progression. In those first 3 years of life, it happens so fast. It's like 1 minute, the baby's turning over, beginning to turn over. The next minute, baby's cruising furniture. It happens really fast. But we can break it down. We can see the steps that most children typically go through as they're learning these skills. So I want you to think back and relate this to yourself a little bit about when you learn to swim, when you learn to drive a car, when you learn to speak another language. I'll take the swimming example. Most of us, thankfully, were not just thrown into the pool and expected to swim. We might have gotten our feet wet in the water, stepped on the first step, or stepped into the river. If you took lessons, you were often asked to put your head in the water and blow bubbles, right? So getting your head in there next. So that's a progression. It's a learning progression. It's not just going from A to Z. So that's the other piece that the developmental domains will give you, that the ELOF also has provided, is you see that development occurs over time and it shifts. And because even if you're working with the same age group or a multi-age group, you are really going to see some of those changes happening. And by using the learning progressions that we offer you, it makes it more visible to you and to their families. Next slide, please. So I'll just give you an example that we have in our materials. Let's take within perceptual, motor, and physical development. One of the subdomains is gross motor development. And a lot of us are familiar with gross motor development, where the child develops effective and efficient use of large muscles for movement and position. So look what the care teachers did in this classroom. They set up a ramp so that this child could practice her large muscle movement and positioning. And you can see her hands out at the side. So there's a little bit of fine motor going on there too, but she's concentrating so hard on coordinating her large muscles. I'm going to give you another quick example. Another one because cognition was one that most of us did not choose as a thing we pay attention to. One of the subdomains in cognition is emergent mathematical thinking. And so some people may say, what is a baby doing with mathematical thinking? Like, I am just not sure. But one of the things that they're doing to build their mathematical thinking skills is they're using spatial awareness to understand objects and their movement in space. And so taking that coffee can with the opening in the lid and trying to put things inside of it, that's spatial awareness, that's emergent mathematical thinking, that can become part of the curriculum. So it's lovely because it helps you get down to these really nitty-gritty levels about what am I seeing and how can I support that some more.
Thank you, Diane. So building on Diane's donut analogy and that middle ring there that she referred to as the custard or the jelly, another really important aspect of curriculum planning is considering the ages of infancy and corresponding developmental issues that children are sorting out at each age of development. So we looked at the scope, which was the developmental domains, and here we are looking at sequence now. So it's important in recognizing these developmental progressions throughout these ages of infancy. What we know is that the very young infant, 0 to 8 months, all of these things are in play for that child. Security, exploration, and identity. But the main developmental issue and concern and what's occupying most of that child's time is building those relationships and that sense of security. So when we're building a curriculum with that young infant in mind, we're keeping in mind this idea that security is what's most important for this child at that time. When we look at the mobile infant from 8 to 18 months, again, all of these developmental issues are at play and they're most focused on exploring. They're up, moving, needing to get into everything and figure everything out. So we're building our curriculum around this developmental need to explore. I often bring up the story about my son who was 9 months when he started walking. He was so itty bitty. And you can imagine by age 1, he was running up and down any and everything. And I remember a mom said to me in childcare, "Oh, aren't you so excited? Your 9-month-old is walking." And I thought, no, I wanted to scream and say no, but I just smiled and I didn't say anything else because I was really wrapping my head around this idea that my baby was going to need so much stimulation around exploration. Then we look at this final stage here for the older infant, ages 18 to 36 months. What they're really grappling with at this age is identity and who they are in this emerging sense of figuring this all out. And, oh, I am separate from my peers and my caregivers. I get to make my own choices. And we know that language explodes in this time period. So lots of thinking about their identity at this stage.
Oh, you're back. You buffered a little bit.
Oh, okay. Am I still back?
Carry on, Amber. Carry on.
Thank you. Let me know if something goes awry.
I will.
The other part, thank you, of the jelly, so the final piece, when we're planning curriculum and considering how we're going to do that, is we must consider the learning context. And what's exciting about this is we know that learning happens for infants and toddlers all day, every day, and everywhere. What we're suggesting in PITC with our curriculum is that you think about it in these three learning contexts, planning curriculum in these three learning contexts. This is where our plans come to life. We've documented, we've observed, we've documented, we've reflected, and then we make our curriculum plans and they come to life. We get to try out our ideas, our hypotheses. So the first learning context we're going to consider is the environment. Usually when we think about planning the curriculum, we think about our environments, inside our outside spaces, our materials. That's kind of like our go-to when we think about curriculum. So our learning progressions, which I'll talk about in a moment here, and Diane talked about previously, are organized by ages of infancy. Then they're organized by learning context. So then you can think about, oh, I need some ideas for the environment. And we have developed this tool that gives you some ideas for curriculum planning in the environment. The next learning context are our routines. We know with infants and toddlers, they are in routines all day. They are napping, they're eating, they're getting their diapers changed, they're using the potty all day. It's like repeat, repeat, repeat. And that's their routine, that's their curriculum, being in routine. So we're suggesting that we're planning curriculum while in routines. And so we have ideas for that as well, which our ideas are called first steps. And then the final learning contexts are interactions. As we've been talking to people about interactions, oftentimes we're noticing that oftentimes people don't think of their interactions as being part of the curriculum. What we're suggesting is that, yes, they are part of the curriculum. As we talked about earlier, the adults are the facilitators of this learning. So our verbal and nonverbal cues, our interactions with our children, our ability to facilitate interactions between two children, families, all are a part of the curriculum. Okay. So here we are, the learning progressions that we've talked about and that I just mentioned. They're oriented by developmental progressions, organized around the developmental issues that I talked about, young, mobile, older, and then the ages of infancy. Like the ELAF, the Head Start Early Learning Outcome Frameworks, our learning progressions have learning goals that then go down that inform our curriculum planning. Our learning goals then go into the first steps that I was talking about, and these are ideas to inspire curriculum planning. We know that care teachers have their own ideas, and as Diane said, use their imagination and curiosity and resources and education and experience to plan curriculum, and we have some ideas to help support that. In addition, our ideas support your novice teacher and your experienced teacher because it gives some of these ideas to give us that jumping off point. And then that experienced teacher could use these ideas to help train and inspire their staff, feel validated through experiences that they're using, tweak some of the experiences that they're already offering. And what's exciting about these learning progressions are many things, but let me tell you a couple that I just love. One, hundreds of first steps ideas are already organized for you with beautiful color-coded developmental domains. I am a school supply nerd. I just love like Staples, those type of stores. When things are organized and pretty, it's appealing. I want to pick it up and use it. Oftentimes we get books and have professional developments that just end up on the shelf. We want you to use this, flip the pages, get in there and be inspired. So that's exciting. The first steps ideas, like I said, will inspire and support curriculum planning. The learning progressions support, like I said, that novice teacher and that more seasoned teacher. Real life relatable examples can be found throughout. So most of the first step ideas are then accompanied by examples, which then tell you, oh, maybe you can do it like this. And we were really careful about leaving them specific, but also open enough for then you can say, oh, I like that idea, but I want to try it this way. Or they said it like this, I want to try it in Spanish, or whatever the case is. The learning progressions are also supportive of professional development. Like Diane talked a lot about, really helping teachers articulate what it is they know and what it is they're seeing. The language is there for them. And say, get in there and get used to and practice with this information. And it's supportive of the same processes. And I think I saw this in the chat, and skill sets that people are using to do their formative assessments. So things like the DRDP, foundations, or whatever your program might be using. And if your programs are not, which I think most of you are, being early Head Start, but I've come in contact with programs that may not do a formative assessment. And what I've said is, well, if you're talking to families and parent conferences, it really helps inform those meetings because you're being very specific in your conversations about child development. Okay. So as you have probably concluded, there are several layers to the PITC curriculum. And here's the bottom line. This is what we want you to know. Learning is always happening for infants and toddlers. They need responsive, respectful relationships with their care teachers to facilitate their learning agenda, to help them understand the world. Learning happens in 3 learning contexts. I've outlined those as the environment, interactions, and routines. So care teachers have to then ask ourselves, okay, so you're saying I have to be in relationship with children, I observe them, I document their interests and their wonderings. Now what? What happens next? How do I plan a curriculum? And that's what this slide is showing. What's next? What happens? The answer to that question is the learning progressions are what helps us do that. And we talked about that on the slide before. Those learning progressions are what help give you those ideas for planning that stepping off point. So what I want you to know about the curriculum is that we wanted to make sure that our curriculum was comprehensive, representative, and flexible. It was quite the process developing something that entailed all of those things. So we have learning and development goals, there's scope and sequence, we consider the family and the culture, dual language learning, inclusion and belonging. A curriculum that embraces the beauty and richness of diversity. What's included? When you order the curriculum, you get the curriculum book. You get, and that book includes the philosophical, foundations of the PITC curriculum, PITC curriculum planning, and all of that is broken down into 11 chapters that are just really inspiring to read and to process. It's full of appendices, which include the PITC Curriculum Planning Tool, samples for filling out that planning tool, and a fidelity tool. So what we're doing with this fidelity tool is to really assess if your program is implementing the PITC curriculum to fidelity. You will also get the PITC learning progressions that we talked so much about, with hundreds of first step ideas broken down into 21 subdomains. And we also have responsive process examples. And we've gotten great feedback on our examples, that they are real life, people see themselves in them and they can relate to them. Finally, you'll get 7 caregiving guides that PITC have published, that were published by CDE, the Guide to Developmental Learning, and so on, Guide to Setting Up Routines. The PITC curriculum can, of course, be purchased independently, but it's most effective when it is purchased in conjunction with our dynamic PITC curriculum training. Our trainings are led by experts in child development and really helps with the implementation of PITC to fidelity. For more information, this is how you can contact us. That's me, that's my contact information. Feel free to take a picture with your phone, write it down, and we will get these slides to you. To receive information about future events, be sure to subscribe to wested.org/subscribe. And then there's our website directly to the PITC curriculum. Thank you so much for your time. We have some closing thoughts from Danny before you go.
Hi there. Thank you very much, Amber and Diane, for a great session. Thank you to all of our participants for joining us. I really appreciate you being here. I just want to, just a reminder, yes, please feel free to visit us online at pitc.org/PITC-curriculum to learn more about the curriculum, and you can actually fill out a form there if you'd like and request samples and maybe talk to one of our, or talk to Amber and learn more about training. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. I really, really appreciate you being here again, and be well. I hope you have a nice day today. Fernando, if you want to take it on.
Thanks, Danny. And thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Of course, thank you to the WestEd team for all their information and just great presentation. Before we wrap up, I just want to remind everybody that this session was recorded and will be made available for on-demand access to all registered participants. Roughly in the next 24 hours, we should have it up on our YouTube channel. So you'll be receiving a follow-up email from us containing the link to access the recording once it's ready. A separate follow-up email will go out in just a few minutes containing some of this contact information, as well as the certificate of participation for all of you who are tracking your PD hours. So watch for that email going out in just a few minutes. And then lastly, just to remind everybody what Danny just mentioned, once the session ends, you will automatically be taken to an online survey. So we ask that you please just take a few minutes to complete the feedback form. We would greatly appreciate your feedback for your participation today. So once again, thanks everybody. Thanks everybody from WestEd for your time today, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks everybody.